And I'll get you to introduce this lady, who's right there,
Okay.
who's Jill Kowalchuk. And she will be,
Is that spelled phonetically?
it is,
Okay.
Kowalchuk, yeah,
Kowalchuk.
basically. Kowalchuk.
Kowalchuk.
Kowalchuk. Kowalchuk. Yeah. I mean, I'll introduce you to her as well. And originally I had written up something that you could say, you know, here's Jill, and she's blah, 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 but she said, just say, and now I'm gonna pass it to Jill, and she's gonna take it from there. She'll introduce
Herself and the panelists,
yeah,
okay.
exactly. And you're welcome to stay, obviously, or you're welcome to bolt after that. Totally up to you.
I might stay.
Yeah.
Staying is easy.
Yeah, well, it's about shared socks, so it's about all the the Security Operations Center from around the world, so it's kind of an interesting topic. So, yeah.
Hi.
10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
What are you looking, depends on what you're looking for.
True.
Walking into a room going, I'm in the right room doesn't do much.
Well, I'm clearly in the right room, because I followed this. My phone is on the different time zone.
So this is Zoom microphone check, just testing, make sure we can hear us. Yes, we're good.
You can hear me fine. All right, check in there. Vivi, yeah. So you introduced yourself to them and,
I just started talking.
okay. Oh, and this is Dan Schnell from Juniper.
Hi, what was your name? Dan.
Yeah, so Dan will be
All I heard
introducing
was
you.
cookie.
That's right, I had my mouth full of cookie, yes, sorry. So Dan will be introducing you, and I just said you can just introduce Jill as
Yeah.
Jill, and she'll take it from there.
Fantastic.
I introduce you, you introduce her, and.
So Kowalchuk.
Yeah.
Kowalchuk.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm sure I'm the only Jill, so you could probably just go Jill.
Either way, whatever you feel comfortable with. I was just going to say I'm Dan.
Hi Scott, how are you?
Yeah, he can hear us.
I'm doing well. This is my first day back from vacation, so this is a crash course in everything.
Nice Dan. Yeah, I know. I was like, appreciate it, Scott. Thanks. And
My pleasure.
And Scott, could you maybe just confirm that you're able to share? Because my plan was just to have each one of you share your own slides on your end, obviously.
Those of you who are coming in,
Great. You can stop share now, Scott. Thanks.
so you can be, so they can see that it's not an empty room.
Want us to move closer? Okay.
And hi Lee, how are you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking, see the room up, the room view up there, so that there'll be,
Lee, can you hear me okay?
sorry,
You
Joe.
want us to appear?
On the camera. Coming up.
Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
No, that's okay.
Just want to see the speaker.
There you are.
Okay, I think I can hear you now, Lee, but you gotta say something.
Okay.
So Lori, right here under the speaker is good?
See yourself up there?
One more perhaps, no?
We see my butt, what the heck? Aren't we supposed to?
Good thing you didn't sit down at lunch.
No, we're just trying to make sure that our remote speakers, our remote presenters actually see people in the room. I mean, they will, because they see the back camera too. Which one of our remote speakers is up in the middle of the night?
That would be Lee.
Hi, Lee, you're up in the middle of the night?
I really need Lee to say something so that I know your audio works.
Hello, Jill.
Hi, Lee. Great, you're here. I am, I was going to tell you you could totally call in sick. I think you had a really good reason, but you look great.
Yeah, it's yeah. The elbow is what's hurting at the moment. So
All right.
yeah, it's what it is.
We appreciate
Sound like I
it.
missed quite a story there.
I went out on Sunday on the bike, and I felt my pedal felt a little bit sketchy, so I thought I'll just quickly check it and make sure it was okay, and checked it. It seemed fine. Gave it a good looking at. 2 seconds later, literally 2 seconds later, going up, just starting off, pedal went away. Actually, it's on my desk at the moment, so it's supposed to be Yeah. So yeah. So that was nice, interesting. Landed in the middle of the road, and a trip to local minor injuries and then hospital. So.
You gotta make sure the person who's the moderator's name is listed.
No, I'm the moderator.
Room moderator. We need the question asker person. Are you watching it on which?
I am. I'm on. I'll go in. I'm not in there yet. I'm just going in. Yeah.
You that I'm gonna rename you so people know who to send it.
I can do it. I can rename myself. Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanna make sure people know not to use,
Yep.
everyone.
Yep.
So I just tried to join from my phone so that I can see chat and such. Is that okay?
You can't do it. I'll be monitoring chat. You don't have to.
So then I'll just,
Unless you plan on doing a Q&A with them yourself? Like, was it part of the presentation to do a Q&A? I'll be monitoring the chat as well. I can focus on the questions that you wanted to ask them, and then I can pick up the audience questions. Focus on
sure, I just thought if there was like chat or something, I
Exactly.
could try and, so
Will work.
I just need someone to let me in. Am I not in the right?
Oh, maybe I'm set up. Maybe check back there. Sweet.
Are you sitting in those chairs?
No, no, nobody will sit in the chairs.
That's good. Confusing.
Only missing.
Nope, I'm here. It's good.
Okay, oh, great.
We're all like holograms.
You, Dave.
Hey, how you doing? Not yourself. Good, they let you out, are you? Just get down this morning.
I see you guys came yesterday. I always.
Oh, they have those sections where it's like completely in every direction now.
Slow you down to 70.
Maybe standing the whole time.
I only have 5 things to say. I get to, I can find a seat somewhere in the audience.
And then you're down to 70 again. It's like, why bother? It's actually easier to get to cello. With the voice.
Really nice you split your feet up much high, your ball's got a slight flow. And you just let the
Fabulous. Yes, I saw him.
way less stressful.
Press the radar and try to soak up my
Because yeah, I do want to just give my one because
Theoretically, we want the lawyers. Plug in your own router, switch on the other side of that.
So, 9.
microphone.
We thought like, I figured
Yeah.
have a great meeting with Tracy.
So I now report. Yeah, they're having trouble picking up the cybersecurity. They went to 1 in July.
Yes.
How are you?
Okay.
Probably. So far, yeah. We haven't done this one yet. This will be the exception.
But like regionally, perspectives were coming from faculty or division.
So, freedom. Yeah. Might not do turn mine down. Still kind of like coming out of my
It is.
So then there was no point in being in it.
No, I can, and they, I'm gonna get people just to send me questions to the moderator.
Stealing other people away.
It's, you know, there's so much discovery trying to figure out. We had no idea what.
You're just
I'll
telling
go
me.
last, but I need.
Yeah.
Pas vous, pas le goût de faire ça, genre.
Okay, everyone, I think we're gonna get started. For those coming into the room, please grab your seats. Welcome to our virtual audience, wherever you went. You were there a minute ago, but you're not there. Virtual audience, and we have a couple of speakers as well, so I won't go into that. It is I'm Lori McMullen. I'm the Executive Director of Cuccio, so we're co-presenting Canheit 2022 with the University of Fraser Valley. It's a pleasure to see all of you and all your smiling faces, and I think we're all talking about that a lot in terms of, yes, people, real people. And it's great to be back and be able to see people and to share and learn from each other, which is what Canheit's all about. We've identified in the program, as you saw, some feature presentations that we wanted to highlight, obviously, for a variety of reasons. We've asked our partner sponsors to participate by being providing a few opening remarks or welcome remarks and to introduce our feature presentations. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Dan Schnell from Juniper, who is, as I said, one of our partner sponsors, without which Canheit would not happen, not only for the financial support that they provide us, obviously, but also for the technical information that they provide and the experience and generally sharing with us what they're doing. So Dan's going to provide a few opening remarks, and then he'll introduce actually our moderator for this panel, and we will go from there. So over to you, Dan.
Thank you. So Dan Snell, I am a consulting system engineer with Juniper Networks. I'm actually not on the security side, so I have a little bit of a cheat sheet up here for myself. I am focused on Wi-Fi, so yes, there's security that comes into the Wi-Fi piece, whether it's AES encryption, WPA3, all those evolutions. And since my specific product portfolio has a cloud-based network management piece, there are things like SOC 2 compliance, there are things like the ISO certifications that typically we are asked to do, usually by our customer base, saying, hey, we need more security. We want to make sure the cloud platforms that we use are secure, that they are in line with industry standards. On the Juniper traditional security side, it's a full breadth of product. So we're coming to market with next generation firewalls, advanced threat detection, running across on-premise, cloud infrastructure, virtual services that can be hosted with an AWS or a GCP or your cloud provider of choice. And it's very complete in terms of what we offer today and entering more of the SASE market space as well. So I'm going to stop talking. You're not here to hear me talk. You're here to hear Jill talk with the other panelists. So without further ado, thank you.
And our sincerest thanks for being here today. My name is Jill Kowalczyk, and I'm the Senior Director for CATSOC at Canary. It's very fitting that our sponsor introducer is from Juniper, as Juniper is a very long-time proud supporter of Canary. So that's very important to us. So first, in the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to start off by acknowledging that where I'm from, Calgary, Alberta. I have the absolute pleasure to live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina and Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all of the people who, like me, have the pleasure of making their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. And so with that, this is the first of a few presentations and panels that I've had the pleasure of pulling together for Canheit this year. If you attended Canheit last year, CanSoc put together a number of different sessions on a variety of different topics to pull together for the community. And so we really got a lot of positive feedback on that last year, really taking different areas and being able to focus on different aspects of security, both areas that in solutions and services that CanSoc's working with the community on providing, but even more importantly with different, bringing together different people to present on different areas inside cybersecurity. So that's a bit of what you'll see over the next coming weeks, or days, sorry, if you're able to join us, and this is the first of those. So before I pass it off to our panelists, we're going to do the majority of talking. I would like to state that you might have heard our sort of mandate from the CanSoc side, better than you can do on your own, always in partnership. And that certainly still rings true. We're really excited about the new news where we're operating Department of Canary. If you're available after this session, you can come to the next session where we'll talk a little bit more about that with Pete and Chad and Alex from McGill, where we'll dive into some more aspects of that. But on today's, this session right here, taking a little bit of a different approach where we've been collaborating over the last year with our partners in, global partners in the US, UK, and Australia on a variety of different aspects. We work on sharing threat intelligence that we're seeing hitting our sector to provide more and stronger actionable intelligence for the community. We've also been working together around sharing different best practices on what we're currently doing, what we're looking at doing, how we can learn from each other and share and collaborate more. We recently had a session led by Axel and another colleague, Elena, where we had each organization talk a little bit about what they were doing related to use cases and the Security Operations Center activities that they had. It was a really insightful presentation. I was really excited about seeing both the differences in which each one of us were tackling how we move forward with this, as well as a lot of similarities in terms of challenges and opportunities on how we move forward. And so I know in many of the conversations that I have with you and others in the community, I felt that there could be a lot of benefit in having each one of them sort of talk a little bit about what they're doing directly to you. And so with that, the majority of the session will be each one of them talking a little bit from their perspective on the initiatives inside their organization, and then we'll open it up for questions and to have a little bit of a discussion. So with that, I will start off with our neighbors to the south and pass it over to Scott Orr from OmniSoc to talk a little bit about that.
That was a really horrible choice, because if you knew me better, now that you're giving me the mic, no one else might ever get a chance to talk again in this thing. So my name is Scott Orr. I am the SOC operations manager for OmniSoc. OmniSoc, here based in the United States, is a higher ed shared SOC made to kind of help, and it kind of grew out of, let me see if I get my things here. We sort of grew out of a what if sort of situation. In 2017, a Big Ten academic alliance, they got together, the CIOs, the CISOs, and they were bemoaning all of the issues it has with trying to secure each of the environments. And our CISO got the wild idea, hey, what if we created a shared SOC? And he's a very persuasive person. And so 6 months later, we were operational. They chose to base this out of Indiana University for a variety of reasons. One was that we have two distributed, highly capable capacity data centers, one in Bloomington, Indiana, the other in Indianapolis, which is where I live. But one of the biggest drivers is, and some of you might be familiar with this, IU helps manage what they call the global NOC. We help manage a number of regional, national, international networks. And the best part of it is they have a very well-staffed, well-established 24/7/365 NOC. And so we piggybacked off of that. In addition, Indiana University is also the site for the Research and Education Network, ISAC. And so having that very close partnership and to pull threat intelligence back and forth was a really nice sort of partnership. We've been active now for a little over 4 years. Currently, we're taking in just over 9.4 terabytes per day, which is translating to a little over 14 billion events per day. And to house all of that data, we have partnered with Elastic and have a number of SIMs that are collecting all of that data. Our mantra, our goal, our mission statement is basically to minimize the time between the first awareness of a threat anywhere to mitigation everywhere for our members. In short, in the kind of simplified form is once we find any sort of reportable activity in one location, we go across all of our members and notify them and look for evidence there. So to kind of help that. In fact, we've had probably over 2 dozen, situations where we saw an attack at one location and it was actually across multiple institutions. So that's really sort of helped us out. Now, we started off with 5 Big Ten institutions. One sadly dropped out early into the pilot. But since then, in the 4+ years, we have grown to what we are today. We have a number of large and small scale institutions. And also through our partnership with the Global NOC, we've actually also are now supporting a couple of regional networks. One is known as the ILITE Indiana Gigapop, which is supporting connectivity to many of the universities here across the Indiana state. Another one is the Southern Crossroads. In addition, we partnered in a grant with Duke University and the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center to help in an NSF-funded project to help NSF major facilities improve their security posture. And so we provided the detection and the collection of log data capabilities. Duke provided a honeynet sort of capability, and PSC provided vulnerability scanning. And we also have consulting services that kind of help them secure their environment. And we're absorbing a lot of that sort of capacities right now. A little bit more the technical side, we collect a lot of different logs. And one thing we made a point of, especially since we started with large institutions first, is we were data source agnostic. Many large institutions in particular have well-established campus SOCs, a lot of technology they've invested in. And so we didn't want to push other technology in there, say, oh, now here's how we're going to collect stuff. What we want to do is to leverage their investment they had already made. And so what we did then is have them identify what types of logs they could provide us, and then mechanisms to transport those to us. And we broke those up into basically 3 big areas. One is what we considered kind of the must-have bare minimum to really help us get started with our analysis. And then the other 2 areas are things that would help augment that. And the big thing we were kind of balancing this off with is the volume of data they have, the visibility they have, versus the capacity they wanted to help support and pay for. So kind of finding that sweet spot was always that big challenge. Now, how we get that data from their institutions to us, we do ship some equipment out to them. It's either in hardware, where we'll send a couple of hardware aggregators, or we'll send them in virtualized form. And the primary purpose of the aggregators is to run a series of Kafka instances to act as a message broker, to kind of hold up to a maximum of 24 hours worth of data in case there's any break in the communication between our location and theirs. In some cases, their log sources are providing to us have network capability to push that data out. And so they would push it directly out to the aggregators using, from our side, collecting with a log stash to pump into Kafka. In other cases, we took advantage of Elastic's number of beats that are tied to different log sources, and they can install those agents there to copy directly to us. Now, at the aggregators, no processing is really being done at the remote site. It's just collection and then passing it through. And the way they pass it through to us is through an encrypted tunnel, whether it being IPsec or TLS, depending on the networks we have between the 2 institutions. And then it goes into our Elastic SIM configuration. We have a number of local log stash configurations for that. That's going to do all that pipelining conversion of the formats into one that we can do to include a lot of the normalization. If any of you have ever gone through one log source to another, everybody seems to have their own way of referring to things like source IP. And so we kind of do that sort of normalization there. So it's really easy for my team to pivot not only from one log source to another, but even from one member to another for our data analysis. In addition, we do a series of enrichments too, adding metadata to help improve my team to be able to isolate on a lot of things that we're looking for. And once we've done all that work, we pump it into a number of Elasticsearch clusters for use by my team. Now, as far as some of the enrichments, some ones are very basics that we'll do. We'll do things like GeoIP tagging, ASN information. We'll talk directly into each of the records. We also, when we onboard each new institution, we try to find out from them who are their crown jewels, what are the things they're really worried about, and we identify those as well. So we'll tag in our documents what are their critical servers, critical IPs, net blocks, and all that. We also, like through our partnership with the REN ISAC, we'll do threat matching right off there and tag in that. So if we see, let's say, a remote IOC that's in the REN ISAC database, we'll pump data into that, or from Stinger honeypots as an example. We do a number of DNS sort of query things too to kind of add some information to, as well as some big data sort of stuff like some beacon detections that I'll mention briefly later on. So once we have all that data in there into our platform, that's where my team really takes over. We do our analysis as sort of our overview block diagram. So we do that in a lot of different ways, which I'll talk about shortly. But we will utilize not only the information that we've collected, we utilize information that we can get from a number of online sources, both open source and commercial, and also information that our members have provided us. And we try to tweak this to what their needs are. And sometimes there's a lot of this going back and forth to say is reportable, is not reportable. If you find something that looks suspicious enough based upon what we have to report, we send it over to those members as a ticket. Sometimes we just don't have quite the visibility. It looks a little suspicious, but we're not quite sure. And so we have a lot of open dialogues with the members of saying, here's what we're seeing. Can you provide us some more information? And they usually have other logs that we don't have access to that they correlate with that. One thing that we're also looking to doing now, and particularly in conjunction with Elastic's endpoint package, is doing some automated mitigations. Some members we have are interested in that, such that if we see certain high value sort of environments that look like they're being hit and they're really worried about, that instead of just sending a ticket over and letting them handle it, that we can temporarily shut off access or isolate those machines until such time that they can dig deeper. Now, a lot of the things that our security analysts start with are pre-created detections. These detections are either created by Elastic or in many cases by us. Especially all the ones that are created by my team are based on the MITRE attack framework, which I'm sure many of you are just very deeply familiar with. And so we kind of look at the log source we have and using the attack navigator to figure out what sort of detections we can do with those. And then looking at the attack surfaces, what are the things that we're really worried about, and build a series of automated attacks based upon that. And now recently Elastic has added a really nice engine for us to kind of implement that with really not a whole lot of extra effort. So here's an example of one we created where if PowerShell is example fired off by like Outlook or Word, we want to know about it. And so on the left side there, you have the author, how critical we have it, what MITRE frameworks that it maps to, and any other documentation that our analysts can sort of use to get more detailed information. And the right side, we actually have what does that sort of detection look like. So in this case, being a query-based one, what indexes we're looking at, what are the fields, and also below there, how often we want that to run, which is in this case is 4 hours. Now, when one of those alerts trigger, what it will then do is send out a message to our Slack instance. And we have a special channel just devoted to these sort of alerts. And so this is sort of an example, a little sanitized that you can kind of see. So we'll identify what member it is that's in a detection, what sort of criticality we put it on, and then detail links for our analysts to kind of help them with the analysis, especially if it's one they've not done before. Now, if you look at the bottom of that screen, you also see a couple little, little boxes there. When a particular analyst picks it up within Slack, they'll select the first one. So that's an acknowledgement, so we know that someone is in fact looking at that. We're getting timely approach to that. And the second one is a done one when they have completed their analysis. Now, in this particular case, it was one that was chosen, found to be not one that was reportable. If it had been, there'd have been a third icon that once the analysis was complete would be put on there, which was basically like a little police light, siren sort of light. And underneath that, we'd reply to that with a ticket number so that we could track it further from there. Now, some of the examples that we have that are a little bit more generic for our various members. We look at malware activity, particularly transfers of known hashes. We'll look for anything from network intrusion detections that are viewed as being critical from them. There are outbound events. Incoming events we see all the time. It's like the internet's working. People are scanning us. Good, we know that. But outbound we're a little bit more concerned with. Other file transfer events that are not email or tied to various honeypots. we want to know about. And also we try to be very active when I have what I would call newsint sort of, news media intelligence sort of thing. So a great example, I'm sure you all remember from end of last year, was a Log4Shell. When that came out, we built some alerts around that. The first one was a very generic one based upon the basic NIDS alerts that the vendors have created. The second one we created from an in-house sort of one where we kind of had a curated list of addresses that the attackers are having the compromised systems or approach systems vulnerable communicating back to. And anytime we saw a match, one of our machines in any of our networks talking back to one of these other servers, we want to know about and do immediate investigation. So these are some examples of some of the alerts that we put across the board. We have a lot of other ones that are fine-tuned to each individual members. Now, that is in our daily incident sort of investigations, the kind of the initial core that our analysts will do, this automated sort of detections. Beyond that, what we have our analysts do are taking a look at those NIDS alerts and doing some different sort of analysis with them. One we look at what we call the newly encountered alerts. So essentially what we look at is we usually hold 30 to 45 days worth of data for each member. Do we see any new NIDS that have fired off, new IDs that have fired off, let's say in the last 24 hours or the last 72 hours that haven't fired any time previously? Reason we want to do that is twofold. One, it could be that the member has installed a new signature. We want to find out what that is and why it's triggering. Another case, if that signature has been in place for a while, why is it now triggering? Is there a campaign going on? So we'll look at that. And then we'll turn around and look over the last 24 or 72 hours and look at spikes. Spikes being a particular NID alert that's firing up a bunch of times, or maybe a remote IOC, which is firing up a bunch of alerts across the environment, or maybe an internal machine or systems that are generating a whole bunch of alerts going out. So we think, kind of investigate all those. Beyond that, then we start looking at things from internal and external intelligence. The first one is kind of what I talked about in our mission slide there, is that as we found some things that were previously actionable items that we sent to one member, we look for some of those indicators again across all the members. We do it initially when we report a ticket, and then continually over a period of time until it ages out for future occurrences of that. On the other side, we do a lot of external threat intelligence stuff. We have a number of Twitter feeds, blog posts that we are following daily that my engineers are looking at. We're gleaming IOCs and such from those to kind of search across all of our members for finding things. In fact, sometimes we have found things that were not even in the signatures, but tied to a signature-based sorts of attacks that we've seen before. And then finally, in the daily things, we kind of try to go the opposite direction. We filter out everything we know to be good or things that the members don't care about or things that are proven to be false positives, and look for anything that's odd for whatever definition you want to use of odd over that time. And this is something that kind of grows. The more and more we get to know the members, the more and more we talk to them, we kind of know what is expected traffic in their environment and what's unusual. Going deeper from that, this is where my analysts really get, or my engineers really get into full force. One we'll do is our traditional sort of threat hunting. As an example, we'll take the MITRE framework, pick a tactic, pick a couple different techniques, figure out what that might look like, and start hunting across the members to see what that might reveal. Sometimes, especially when we had some luck with that, that will then also develop into future detections that we provide. In addition, depending on the data sources we have and the metadata sources included in there, we also will look for things that are least frequently occurring. The example I show you here is we're collecting, say, in some cases, HTTP traffic. If we have the internal member user browser agents, we expect to see lots of Chrome and Edge and Safari and the like. But what are the ones we don't see, but maybe from 1 or 2, 3 machines? We'll start isolating on that and find out what those are. Sometimes that can be quite legitimate. We see, Python scripts quite, often, especially like from CS departments, but sometimes you see some things that are a little bit more suspicious. So those least occurring sort of things. And then finally, we'll look at things from that big data sort of approach here. We have our platform engineers modified a version of a program called Flare, which looks for C2 beaconing through statistical analysis of sessions. We'll look for those things. Do we see repeated connections to remote sites, especially those that are being marked as perhaps malicious, and start seeing if there is some command and control traffic going on there. And the thing that we're also starting to delve into more now is Elastic is starting to invest a lot more into machine learning, both in their architecture as well as a lot of jobs. And so we're applying that to our environments too, to kind of look for any sort of anomalies that we might see that are worth reporting. So once we do all that, how do we interact with our members themselves? The most common one, we see something bad, we tell them about it. And that usually comes in the form of a ticket sent in whatever way they ask for us to. In addition, we create an email list for each member. And in that email list, at a minimum, what they get is a monthly hunt summary. And it's not just the things that we've hunted across and found in their environment, but it's a sanitized list of everything we found across all the members. And so they kind of see the different sort of attacks that are hitting not only them, but others. And we try to provide a lot of detail with that. The other thing, as I sort of mentioned, like with the log4shell, anything that considered a media or news sort of intelligence sort of things, we try to send out a message very early saying, hey, this is what's going on right now. Here's what we're doing about it right now. Here's maybe what we're going to do about it really soon. And if we have even mitigation details, we'll provide that. The reason we do that is that we know, and I've having my previous life being a system administrator, know that upper management, presidents, chancellors, CIOs, as soon as they see something in the media that looks scary, they come talk to you. What are you doing about this? So we provide them to let the various campus SOCs know what we're doing on their behalf to help them with that. We do meet by video with our members by their choice, either bi-weekly or monthly, to talk about whatever really is coming up. Could be updates to the platform, could be new log sources, could be incidents that we're investigating, so we do like to get feedback from them, new types of things we're detecting on. We kind of make it kind of an open forum, whatever they'd like to talk about. One thing we also will do with our members is if they're investigating something internally or from another source, they found out about some problem they'd like our assistance with, we'll do joint collaborative investigations. We'll set up through Zoom. We'll share our dashboards and our analysis and our data and have an ongoing conversation and work together as one team to investigate those particular incidents. For more ad hoc communication, every member has its own Slack channel that we interact with. And so we'll use that for all sorts of conversation and information sharing. And then one thing we also do, which is a little different from some of the commercial folks out there, is that right now we have like a hunt journals, which is a glorified way of calling Google Docs, where every time one of our analysts or engineers are doing investigations, whether it's reported or not, we put all the details of that investigation there. We share those with our members. So if a member wants to see what we're looking at in their environment, especially the things that we've not reported, they have all that detail there. In some cases, we have members who actually even annotate on that to provide us more context. We are moving to a more commercialized case management system, but our plan is still the same, to share that information with them. And then finally, the last thing I kind of want to talk about is, especially as we've grown, some of the challenges that we have faced. The first one I sort of already mentioned is finding that sweet spot between having enough visibility to do a lot of meaningful detections and the log volume that we need to store and able to do that. And that's sort of always an ongoing tweaking sort of thing with big institutions, small institutions. It varies from there. The other one we learned with working with NSF major facilities and small institutions is sometimes they weren't tall enough to ride the ride. They want to do a lot of stuff, but they didn't have a lot of resources. They didn't have a lot of staff, and they didn't really have things configured. So we worked with them to figure out what they needed to add, help them re-architect some things, maybe made recommendations to help them get to a point where we can collect data for them and be of a real value to them. And so that's kind of a internal sort of consulting sort of thing. And the last one that we kind of find with is, because we like to really kind of customize our help for individual needs, we always kind of battle the cattle versus pets sort of thing, where the cattle, we can deploy certain things that are kind of unique or kind of global across everybody, but then also identify those things which are unique to each member and finding what those are and handling that in a very scaled way. And hopefully I didn't go too far over my time. I apologize if I did. Do we have any questions on what we're doing here in OmniSoc?
So thanks, Scott.
Did I go too long? I apologize.
No, all good. That was an excellent presentation. What I think we're going to do is I'm going to get our colleagues in the UK and Australia to give their summaries as well, and then we'll sort of open it up for questions across all of the three initiatives and platforms so we can get a little bit more of that engagement. So with that, I will cross the Atlantic over to my colleague Lee from JISC.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Scott. I've got a big shoes to fill after Scott's presentation there. Just give me 1 second. I'll get my screen up. Can everybody see that? We good?
Yep.
Excellent. So, So yeah, little bit about myself. I'm Lee Harrigan Green. I work for JISC, and I'm the Chief Security Architect in the Cybersecurity Division at JISC. And I'm responsible for the development of new solutions, tools, services, platforms that we either are introducing within the SOC that we provide to the education R&E sector in the UK, and onwards onto where services that we actually run internally as well. Been working in the cybersecurity space for over 15 years now, and previously to joining JISC, I was the network administrator at a university in the UK, in South Wales. I'm just going to quickly talk about the services that we offer and take it from the service perspective. And this slide I'm showing here is a broad range of the services we offer that meet the prepare, detect, respond, recover life cycle of dealing with an incident. We operate something called the Janet network, which is the R&E network in the UK, and it connects every single university in the UK, over 600 further education colleges. And we estimate indirectly we do connect a very large number of schools onto our network as well. We have the members directly connected to our network at 100 gig. So it's that has its own challenges, which I'll go through and give a few more examples of that a little bit later on in my presentation. So yeah, one of the problems with that, offering a network of that sort of size with that sort of numbers, is DDoS attacks. And we have invested a significant amount of time and money into a DDoS platform that we protect our members, and that utilizes Arbor's solution. And we are heavily invested in that. We believe we have received and recorded the biggest DDoS attack against the R&E or the education space. I'm not going to give figures here because that would be quite something to not produce in this environment. But yeah, we do believe we've seen the biggest one. Our CSERT team is responsible for responding and helping recover to incidents, and that does vary because that can be stuff that we pick up from OSINT, that could be stuff that we pick up from hits against the other services that we offer, but it's essentially to deal with the coordination investigation of events that happen, of incidents that happen inside our member institutions, and we offer this to every connected member. So that's a significant amount of customer base that we have in that space there. And that actually in the last 2 years, we've seen over 40 ransomware events of a significant nature on the network. So, and we've provided some form of assistance in each one of those. Going to step forward on the DNS services we offer. So we offer effectively 3 services in this space. We offer a national DNS resolver service, which I will talk about a little bit more in a little while. But we also offer a primary and secondary DNS services. So that would be hosting the primary DNS services for agent member institution that's connected to the Janet network in that environment. We currently offer a managed SIEM solution based upon Splunk. So we're on the commercial route instead of Scott utilizing I've forgotten what Scott was using just now, but we're using commercial service there from Splunk, and we use that for both offering a licensed service to our customers, and also we actually offer a fully managed solution, which we will collate with log forwarders into our instance and manage that on behalf of our members to detect and respond to events that we see for them. We're currently in the final development of a centralized filtering solution, and this is utilizing some significant investment in Palo Alto architecture that we have, and we are now looking to restrict some protocols on the entry to our network. This is quite hard for R&E environment because educational freedoms insist that we don't restrict traffic. but we're seeing with all of the ransomwares that we've had on the sector in the last 2 years that we've got the message through that this now needs to change, and the approach now needs to change, and that's being accepted. We're currently in the development of a managed SOC solution, and that would be utilizing a security orchestration response tooling platform to orchestrate response to detected events. But that would be working with a member to deliver that. So it's not just we've seen an event, then you execute this playbook. It will be the flow through with the CSERT to raise a ticket to advise them there's an event and an issue. We have now launched a managed firewall service. Or actually, it's not yet launched. That'll be next week, fully launched. So that is a solution that's built upon Palo Alto Networks technology. And again, as Scott was saying, we see many of our members that have to be this tool to ride. And especially when it comes to firewalls, we have anecdotes of members which were ransomwared, and their firewall was actually sat in the car park of the institution, not connected to anything. So it just shows the level of issues that we have. And we have some members that have firewalls but have never even configured them, and they just have a default allow in there. So it's a very broad mix of capabilities that we have, and we noticed that quite some time ago. So we now have a fully managed service where we work with a partner here in the UK to deliver a managed firewall to that customer environment. With the key thing being threat intelligence, which I'll be coming on to next. We share our intelligence that we have. So we have a national shared intelligence service that we're using, which is built upon MISP, which all of our collaborators here do use for sharing malware indicators internationally. We offer some professional services. So this is, for instance, we offer a cybersecurity X-ray. So we're looking at what your financial spend is upon cybersecurity solutions, and where you fit in the marketplace. Do you need to spend more? Are you in about the right place? We offer penetration testing to our members. So if they will give us a defined scope, and we have a good team of pen testers available. But we also do, again, security assessment, understand their customers' maturity, and where they need to improve their security posture. We also run some third-party frameworks, purchasing frameworks, which we basically dynamic purchasing schemes, which allow our members to go purchase solutions, services that they want to go direct to market, but we're not necessarily providing. So that's a lot that I've just covered, but I just want to just reiterate that the beating heart of everything that we're doing is threat intelligence, and it's all about the threat intelligence that we offer. And we see, and I see this falls into one of three categories. We look at solutions that use threat intelligence as an integral element of its service. They create threat intelligence. So by utilizing that service, we would generate an event which we can use for threat intelligence going forward. Or it manipulates the threat intelligence. So what I mean is that it will use the threat intelligence in some way to prepare, detect, respond, or recover to an event. And I've just, on the slide here, I've just detailed out where that we see these sorts of events. So our managed SIEM, we will look at the logs that the customers are sending us. So that's where they use. We'll generate the alerts based upon that. But then we'll actually manipulate that and feed that back into other platforms. So that covers the broad spectrum. Our national resolver services, we get threat intelligence feed from our international partners and national partners here, for instance, such as I can't say them on the here, but from our national partners' perspective. but then those hits against the intelligence that we have for that will create derived intelligence, which we can then share on, and we are looking to do so. Our DDoS detection and mitigation solutions uses the intelligence from that supplier, but then we can see that when we're seeing traffic going to known botnet hosts, or we're actually seeing botneted hosts from inside our networks, that we can pick that up as well. Our managed firewall, again, uses the threat intelligence feeds we have internally to block attempted traffic to customers. But again, we can use the logging that goes through that Palo Alto firewall to generate new threat intelligence. So for instance, we see a new indicator on the network. We can then distribute that and manipulate that to our other customers and to share that. Our shared national intelligence, that really only uses and manipulates. It doesn't necessarily generate, because it's about sharing that information. Professional services, our penetration testing, they generate a threat intelligence for us, but because that is essentially their job. So they pick up the issues that we will see at a national, potentially repeated at a national level, and we'll feed that back into our customer base. And actually, we will also go report to the suppliers of the common issues where we're seeing common vulnerabilities, and we will go work with that. Our centralized filtering solution, again, is essentially a Palo Alto firewall, so it will be using and generating the threat intelligence in the same way as a managed firewall service. Dark web monitoring, so we're monitoring the dark web on behalf of our customers for looking for compromises. If there's any compromised accounts, compromised systems, doxing, we often see that, and we will pass that information across to the members concerned. We have a NetFlow monitoring platform which takes the NetFlow from our networking estate, which is heavily sampled. Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of one-in-one NetFlow on our full networking estate, because the processor's overhead upon the equipment is quite significant. And we're looking at the managed SOC, that again uses the threat intelligence from that we have, and correlates that with what the information that we'll get from the customer, and then it will manipulate it. We can use that threat intelligence. We see that indicator, we see that hit. We can then go and act upon that information within the customer's environment, go block the account if it's a phishing domain. If we're seeing a C2's traffic, we can use that within their firewalls or within the managed firewall to respond and prevent that traffic going forward. We are in the process of the Janet network monitoring. So this is a proof of concept phase that I'm going to elaborate on in a little bit more in a minute. And our CSERT team. Our CSERT team is again around the heart of this, and they are used for them OS in sources when they're looking at. We'll pass any hits that we see against that from that perspective to our members. They'll generate that intelligence by the utilizing of multiple tools from where we are. And then again, they'll be pushing the hits that we generate into all those solutions, so the resolver services, the filtering services, the managed firewall, in that environment, and to prevent further issues going forward. So I'm going to just elaborate on where we are from the monitoring of the Janet network. And this just put up there's the core of the Janet network. And the core bandwidth varies wildly on a per connection basis between 200 to 800 gigabits. And this is a vast network. How do we monitor it? It's quite a challenge. And I was being challenged with, well, we have NetFlow, can't we just carry on doing that? The problem with the NetFlow we have is it's heavily sampled. We can't use it for forensic purposes. It doesn't give us the viewpoint that we need. It's great for DDoS mitigation, gives us everything that we need for that. But we're now in an environment, in a threat landscape where we need to do more. And so just to give you an idea, the Birmingham node on our core, if we just wanted to monitor that node, we'd have to do 3 terabits of monitoring equipment, and that's just not scalable for the environment that we operate. So we have decided to run a proof of concept in our environment, and we're looking at the regional network entry points. So the slide I just showed you was the core of Janet, the Janet network, and what happens there is each one of those each one of these nodes, there'll be a regional network that comes off that will either connect to two of one of these core nodes. So we have effectively a localized point where we can monitor. And what we're going to do is we're going to implement a platform which we're looking at monitoring at 100 gigs optical level, and we're going to tap that at 100 gig and pass that traffic into a packet flow switch, which will then allow us to specifically tee off and replicate that traffic at line rate. And as we're doing this from an optical tap, it means that we're not impacting upon the network. We're not introducing any overheads for a network which is heavily designed for the pressures that research drive in our environment. So we're going to then put that network traffic into two platforms initially. One is going to be a Zeek platform, which is a network-based IDS, and the other solution is going to be a Silk NetFlow solution, and which will generate one-in-one NetFlow for us. So we now can potentially have that forensic capability that would allow us to go and investigate back in time. But also with using Zeek, we have that real-time analysis as well. So we're looking to kill two birds with one stone in this monitoring. So the sorts of items that we can look for in this monitoring is, again, we're going to get that one-in-one NetFlow that will enable us to look at from a TTP-based detection, enhancing our current incident response capabilities. And because we're going to have that one-in-one visibility, we're just going to give our member greater assurance of when there actually is an event. And so we can't say, well, we think we've seen all of the traffic going out from that ransomware. Actually, we'll be able to say, this is all of the traffic, but by doing so. But also, because we're going to have a Zeek platform in place, we can do targeted packet capture. So the moment that we see any indicators of a C2 hit or anything like that, we can potentially turn on traffic for that organization in a targeted packet capture to be looking and ingesting that in more detail. Passive TLS, we're looking at what we can do at the TLS level, and looking at some hashing that we can do to encrypt to look at the TLS handshake. Quite often we'll see common vectors, common indicators from a threat actor perspective, which we can actually use that as a pattern matching activity to identify actual ransomware which is encrypted. Passive DNS, we're looking at what we can do from this perspective, and what that, so we can look at the domains which rapidly change, or when there's a newly registered domain, we can potentially be highlighting that and say, right, okay, to this customer, you've just seen traffic to this newly registered domain, that is unusual. Or we can even looking for where we've got the passive DNS capabilities, actually looking for the DNS C2 traffic, or even the DNS exfiltration. I don't know if anybody is aware of seen any DNS exfiltration technologies, but they effectively can get around any firewall as a result. So it's key that we have specific tools looking for this exfil, because then that's going to be a quick indicator of when there's a potential ransomware about to detonate. And if we're able to pick up the exfil, we can potentially react in a much more capable way. Again, we're looking at key header values. So looking at we're aware of particular threat actors that have a common user agent and a uncommon user agent, as Scott was saying a minute ago. But also looking for X44, there is some really common services that threat actors will use for forwarding their traffic on to customer members, so they will actually use proxies. So if we're able to direct and detect that traffic before it actually hits our customers, then we can look to do so. JA3 and SSH and SSH fingerprinting. So we can use this as this really useful tool for fingerprinting different clients. And we're able, by utilizing this, we can identify specific clients which are used for malware purposes. ICMP, TTL monitoring, we see this as really useful indicators. This allows us to look at, effectively, we see threat actors using the same addresses, trying to map out the infrastructure in a state that they're traversing through by manipulating the TTL fields. So actually, if we can see the same IP with a shortened TTL, and then it just lengths and gradually gets either longer or shorter, then it's quite often they're going to be doing some kind of reconnaissance scanning. So we can actually then go and potentially go and look at that and investigate that forward. And actually then at the end of this, it's about, we're going to be looking at what we can do from the machine learning perspective. And that is as vast as important, because what we're looking at here is just one node. We're going to be replicating this about 17 or 18 times for the other regional networks that we have off the back of here. So that is going to create its own complexities, but then actually not only complexities, opportunities to enrich data between our regional networks and utilizing in that way. And I'm just going to bring it back to why we're doing this, why I just wanted to tease this out about the monitoring the Janet network. It's about that beating heart being what we can pick out from our threat intelligence. The threat intelligence has to drive our instant response now, and has to drive our solutions. If we're not utilizing our threat intelligence, we're moving backwards. And if we're not sharing that threat intelligence, we're not helping our partners and communities to respond better in this environment that we have at the moment. That's it from me. I'll stick around for questions at the end, and look forward to talking to you shortly.
Thanks, Lee. I appreciate the presentation and looking forward to diving into it a little bit more. But first, I'll pass it off to Nick in Australia, who got up nice and early to finish us off. Nick.
Thanks, Jill. Appreciate that. And thank you as well to Scott and Lee for those presentations as well. Very impressive what you guys are doing. Just let me know when you can see my screen. You should see a slide deck there. Yep, fantastic. All right, I've only got a few slides to go through, and I'll just spend a little bit of time talking about what we're up to on the ARNet side of things down here in Australia. And I want to focus on one particular aspect of this today, which is around our approach to using machine learning and analytics for detection. So I'll probably skip over a number of other things around the service itself, but just in the interest of time, I want to focus on that particular side of things. Just to set the scene a little bit, though, give some background on the ARNet SOC. So similar to OmniSOC and JISC, we're running a shared SOC service for the Australian university sector. This has been in play now, in operations for a couple of years, and really started off this journey early 2019 with the idea to build a SOC for the university sector in Australia. But ARNet is actually owned by the universities in Australia and CSIRO, which is our national science agency. So there are 38 universities in Australia. The model that we have is it's an opt-in model. So universities can decide to come on board for the service and pay for it. And they pay as a subscription for the monitoring service that we provide. For myself, I've been full-time with ARNet since November last year, so relatively new in the role in a full-time capacity, but I was involved in the early stages of the SOC since inception around early 2019 when we started to build things out. I was involved in a consulting capacity at that time to help establish the service and bring things up into operations. So just setting the scene for the size and scope of where we're at the moment. As I said, there's 38 universities in Australia. It's an opt-in model. For the first year through 2020, while we were building this, we brought 4 pilot customers on board. Last year, 2021, we onboarded another 10 universities, and we've got 8 more coming on through this year. So we'll have a total of 22 customers by the end of the year. And that gets us pretty close, like it's over half the sector. We're getting towards the top end of that. There are probably things might taper off a little bit from here in terms of getting customers on board, but we've also recently been looking at opportunities to expand outside of that environment as well. So pretty exciting times. What I want to focus on today is our approach to using, so let's check the chat. Yep, all good. I can't get rid of that chat now. There we go. So our approach, when we were building the SOC out initially, a key part of our strategy was that we wanted to focus on using machine learning and behavioral analytics for detection purposes. So I want to just really talk through now why that's important, how this works, how we're using it, and what some of the challenges have been throughout that. So I think the first thing to understand is the focus of using analytics and machine learning is around shifting from a static to a dynamic model. So static is where we know what bad looks like, we know particular things about how our environment operates and how it should operate, and we want to put in place monitoring specifically for those things. Dynamic is about recognizing that there's a large number of things happening in these environments, and it's not always going to be possible to know exactly how things should work and how they should look, and letting the machines process some of that information and find out what sticks out from that. So static versus dynamic is the core underpinning of this. The key reasons for choosing this approach have been, so firstly from an environment perspective, we're monitoring fairly large environments. We've got a lot of users in environments. We're monitoring staff and student users and assets. They are large, complex places, and even the people that work within those environments sometimes struggle to understand exactly what's going on everywhere at any time. Universities are also, as many of you will know, that there's sometimes organizations within organizations, and not everyone, it's hard to find one person who might know every aspect of the IT environment and be able to help define what some of those static rules might look like. So trying to keep an understanding of how everything should work and put in place rule sets for that is going to become impossible over time. The second part from an external perspective is that attackers are continuing to get quicker and more efficient at executing attacks. They've got a lot of tools at their disposal that they're quite adept at using. And if we're always looking for the latest exploits and the latest toolkits and trying to keep on top of that, it's a never-ending challenge, and they're actually getting a lot faster at developing and churning out these things as well. So it's becoming much more challenging from a threat landscape perspective to keep on top of that. It's not to say that we don't do that as well. We obviously want to try and stay up with the latest techniques and keep on top of events. But we want to recognize that you're not always going to be on top of that. If we can look at what's happening in our environment and understand generally what normal behavior looks like, we're able to detect post-exploitation activity without always knowing exactly how that attack occurred. So if we can monitor a particular asset and see, these are the types of things that a machine always does, when it goes outside of those bounds, we're able to pick that up even if we didn't necessarily know upfront what that initial attack vector was. An example of this might be the recent Confluence vulnerability that was announced a couple of weeks back, which a number of our customers are using. We have the ability to, when that was announced, there was no information about the exploit itself. There was no proof of concept available. We've got the ability to put some of our Confluence hosts in a watch list and just see, do they start exhibiting any abnormal behavior that we might be able to pick up in some way without necessarily knowing exactly what that 0 day is and what it will look like when it gets exploited. So really, this approach is about understanding all the events that occur with an environment. So from that perspective, it's still, at a platform level, still quite similar to what a traditional SOC will do in terms of taking logs and events in. We get all the same data, all the same alerts from our customer environments. We bring those in, but we rely on the analytics platform to make its own observations about those events and how they tie together, and then tell us when things go outside of that normal model behavior. This is really about, the goal of doing this is to get us to look at what are humans doing on the machines themselves and understand, have that conversation with our customers at a human level to say, when this attack happens, yes, there's a machine component to that, but it's really about understanding what the adversary behind that attack is wanting to do as a set of activity, and having that conversation with the customer around what do their users normally do? Do you expect this behavior to be happening? Is this something that you would expect to see? So machines are very, very good at doing that kind of analysis and understanding how things happen in reality, and then we can look at the higher level view of that. So that's really why we're taking this approach. I'm just going to step through a bit of an example around what this actually looks like in practice. We are using commercial off-the-shelf technology to do this. So we have a fairly large deployment of Exabeam as our analytics platform. We do have a number of other components in the SOC for our data lake layer and search and analytics and visualization and so on. But the core of it is our analytics platform, Exabeam, which is monitoring or modeling, I should say, two main objects in the environment. We're looking at assets and we're looking at users. So all the events that come in, whether it's a connection event to say this host talked to this other host, or somebody logged into a system, a user, a computer has reached out to a domain that is on a threat list somewhere. These events all come in and they all get associated with either the asset that's relating to, or the user who's carrying out that action. And everything that happens in that environment, when it's associated with either of those things, if it triggers a rule, it gets associated with a risk score. So risk scores are the center of everything that happens in this environment. How this looks is in practice when this occurs is, as I said, we've got a number of monitored behaviors coming in. So a user logs into a machine, a user accesses a particular application. And I'll step through one example here of a remote logon. So the remote logon might be the thing that's getting modeled. The machine is constantly looking at every user who logs on to every remote system in the environment. And without us knowing up front which users should log on to which systems, the machine itself is going to work out which ones regularly log into other systems. And there's a number of layers to this. It might be that this user has logged onto this machine for the first time, or maybe there's been a remote logon from network A to network B, and I never see logons in that particular way within this environment before. There's a number of different aspects to modeling it. The model is the core of it, and then there are rules that sit on top of that. So the rule in this instance might be one of those examples, users logged on somewhere they've never logged onto before, or perhaps from a different network zone, from one network zone to another. That will trigger a rule. So the monitor behavior is the remote logon. The expert assigned score is what the content developers have decided is the base score for this type of activity occurring. So we can see here it's given a plus 20. That's just an arbitrary number to say this thing is, when this event happens, for this asset and this user that are being modeled, I'm going to assign a plus 20 score. We have a threshold, which I'll talk about in a second, for when that becomes an interesting set of events. The dynamic ML-driven adjustment piece here is saying, it's looking then at the next level above this. So not just how often are these events occurring, but how often does this rule actually trigger in our environment? Because the rule itself might also be something that is fairly prevalent in that environment, even though it is itself saying that this thing is in some way abnormal. So here, for instance, it's bumped that down a little bit. The ML-driven adjustment will only ever reduce the score. It's sort of an anomaly factor to say how often does this thing occur as a discrete event. It's bumped it down a little bit, and it's then saying that for this user logging onto this asset remotely, the risk score for that event, for that rule trigger, is a 14. While that's happening, this occurs within a session. So a user logs onto their machine, the session starts. Then they carry out a number of activities, one of which was this remote logon. But there are other things happening in that session while they're logged in. They may connect to a domain that's been marked on a threat list somewhere as being malicious. They might access an application. They might have a password change or reset. All of these things will occur, and that they might get an endpoint security alert on their machine that they're logged into at that time. All of those things bubble into the system. And when a rule triggers, it's also assigning an additional risk score to that user session. And as that animation was coming through just earlier, we saw those things adding up. And we can see here the total risk score for this session is then 126. Now, again, these are just numbers, but the way that our system works is that anything that goes above 90 is marked as notable. And that means we would look at it to trigger an alert for an analyst to look at and then understand what's actually happened within that session and see why this particular thing has been marked as anomalous. Here's how it looks in the interface. So this is showing a view of a timeline. So that's the other fantastic thing about this, is that all of the events are stitched into a timeline, and we see on the left side the events occurring themselves, just to say this is a behavior that's being modeled. And these are all relatively tangible and understandable things. Despite all the fancy maths happening in the background, it all boils down back to events that an analyst or one of our customers would easily understand to say, here's an activity that we're modeling, that we've observed, this is what's happened. The left side here is just showing what those events are, and the right side here shows us where the anomalies occur. So we can see for this particular one here, web access to updates.microsoft.com, that's just a thing that occurred. But this is saying that this is the first time a user is accessing an internet IP address in the country, United States. That's actually an interesting example because obviously that happens quite a lot, but that's the type of thing that will happen. Almost all of the rules are saying it's the first time something's happened, or it's an abnormal number of things that have happened in that way. An example might be access to administrative shares in the environment. Maybe a user normally accesses 2 or 3 a day, or one day they access 15 or 20. And that's saying that's a normal amount of that. So everything looks like that. And that's really the core, as this is the core detection system that we are using. We do have a number of things outside of that as well to feed into this. And one of the key challenges at the moment has been working through how do we better integrate some of our tools. So our static search engine, which does have its own rule set as well. We bring threat intelligence into there. How do we start to feed some of that stuff into this so that we can really apply that core model of everything being tied to risk score and all of our detections and investigation and response activities being driven around that risk score? That's something we're working through, but this is generally showing how it works. And as I said, it's commercially available software. It is it's something that's actually quite practical and quite tangible, and it's been working quite well for us. And so I just want to spend maybe a couple of minutes talking through some of the challenges and where we're heading next, and that will sort of bring me to a close here. So the first challenge has been, I would like just to call out that I'm focusing on the analytics side, but really this has been one part of building an entire managed security service from scratch. So obviously it takes a long time to build it, the business around it, get the entire platform set up from scratch. So don't look at it as a 2 or 3 year timeline to do this sort of analytics. That's for building an entire SOC. If you were adding this sort of technology into an existing SOC and had an existing set of processes and a team there, it would obviously be very different. So I just wanted to flag that as unique to our situation. For the analytics side itself, one key challenge has been data quality and understanding how the data feeds these models correctly for it to work. This is something that the machine can't help you with in some ways. You still got to understand what you're feeding it with, what data you're loading in, and what that data actually means. So some of the challenges initially have really been around understanding how data gets passed. We have things like source and destination for a SysMon event being backwards. Now, when something like that happens in a static environment, you might have a rule that triggers on that. You can fix that rule and off you go. In this environment, that has actually built up a large number of models then around that behavior occurring. So we need to identify these things really early on and fix it because they do have wide-ranging implications. So tuning obviously is an issue for SOCs everywhere, but it's very, very important to understand in this environment. For large and complex environments, as I said, that we're monitoring, they're pretty noisy and a lot of unusual things happen all the time. So we often see things that we might start to understand a pattern of what happens in this customer's environment, but the machine is still saying this is anomalous because just technically based on how those events occur, it's pretty rare in the scheme of things for it to happen. So we often have conversations with customers around why this thing is triggered again, and just to, we want to still trust that and look at it in that sense, but it can lead to a fair bit of noise and does require a fair bit of tuning to make that work really well. Because of some of the data parsing and tuning issues that we have had, we have developed a custom detection tool that takes us beyond just relying on the notable threshold as well. And this is about saying some rules are actually more reliable than others. Even simple things like saying, if a bunch of things have happened for a particular host, just check that there's a security alert on that host as well from the endpoint software to say that this is a more reliable indicator that something malicious has actually happened, as opposed to it just being purely based on anomalous events. So this is an area that we're really exploring now, and how we can better tune the platform for our purposes. And as I said, we've been developing, one of our content engineers has been developing some custom tooling around that. So that's a really exciting area. And the aim of that is to help smooth out some of the the noise as well. We also have another key part of developing that tooling was that it's all based on risk scores. Some of our assets or users may have a consistently high risk score just based on things that they do normally. We can't always get to tuning all of that, but this tool helps us then determine not just that the score was high, but that it's actually spiked up in a short amount of time. So if an asset's risk score is always 1,000, if that thing actually gets hacked and it goes up to 2,000, we're not going to see that just based on the notable threshold of 90 because it was already above that. So this tool helps us identify those spikes as well. So this is really us getting into the guts of the platform to understand where all this stuff actually lives and working with it more so that we can sort of bend it to our will, if that makes sense. And then I think just the last point to mention in terms of challenges with this approach is that it can be quite tricky to categorize and classify things and explain to customers what's actually happened when we're looking at this stuff. Because as you can see from this snippet here, let's say that we're just looking at the anomalies and the risk reasons that have caused this to trigger an alarm. It doesn't tell you upfront that this is a malware infection or this is a data leakage event or anything of that nature. It doesn't give it a category because by nature, these are all just anomalies in themselves. So our analysts have to actually work out what are things happened here? How do I present that to the customer so they understand what's actually happened and how we need to respond to this? That's something that we're working through from an operational level. So it's separate to how the detection stuff works, but that's just an interesting aspect of taking this approach where we don't rely on static rules. We rely on this these sorts of anomalies for detection. So that's really, I've probably skipped over a ton of things, but just trying to keep it, focus on this core concept. Where we go from here is our next challenge is really around how do we provide better explanations to our customers and better confidence that this is working as intended, because we do definitely know when real attacks have occurred, this system works very well and it does bubble up the events that are of interest. And so things do stand out. The challenge is picking that real signal at that level out of the rest of the noise. And so we're really increasing our manual and automated testing to be able to show where that does work in effect and use that also to tune our detection. So that's probably our next major challenge along this journey. I will leave it there and hand back to Jill, but thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk you through that.
Thanks, Nick, Lee, and Scott. So we have just a couple of minutes left, but want to make sure we give the opportunity if there are any sort of questions for any one of our panelists on what they presented today. We certainly, I recognize there was a lot of information that was presented, and so can certainly set up some follow-up conversations if it makes sense for individuals to go into it.
Question?
Yes, Denny.
Hi, Denis Fortin from University of Montreal. Question for Scott. If I understand correctly, in your shared SOC, if you detect a particularly active attack or something, you can actually kick the machine from your member institution out of the network. Did I understand you saying that? And what is the governance around that?
That is our future plan. We have a few members who are interested in pursuing that and trying to figure out what that looks like with them. And to do that, we would do that with Elastic. But yeah, you've hit on the thing. We've talked about wanting to do this for a while, and when we asked them, all right, what's the governance on that? We can't get a straight answer yet.
Indeed.
Jill, question.
Yeah, Todd?
Do you share any information with Microsoft, and are you between the end user and Microsoft, or how do you get that? So for example, if they have Windows Defender or some of that east-west traffic within their environment.
Who's that
Jump in
directed
first.
Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah. So where we have some visibility of that, we won't share without explicitly permission from our member organizations. Where we derive intelligence ourselves, we may share that with our trusted partners. Microsoft isn't one of our trusted partners in that space, but we have had communications with Microsoft in the opposite side. So we'd had advanced warnings for new issues coming up before in the past, and that sort of threat intelligence sharing does exist. Scott, Nick. I'll let you elaborate on the question.
The only threat and tell that we typically have been sharing religiously is with the Ren ISAC back. Anytime we report something, we send it initially as a low confidence sort of thing with them until we get some confirmations from the member. But otherwise, we've kept it pretty much in-house, and now we're working with how to share it with this team of folks.
Yeah, similar to Scott, we have a local ISAC that we share information out via, and I'm not aware of us having shared anything back directly to Microsoft, but if we were to do that, we would likely go via the customer that has that actual relationship with them and owns that subscription. But yeah, most of our customers are heavily invested in the Microsoft security stack, so that would be something that I could definitely see coming up in the future.
Thanks. So we'll take one final question before I wrap it up.
Maybe it's a good final question. If
Okay.
we have additional questions, what is the preferred method for?
Fantastic. So if you have additional questions, you can send me an email and I can give it to you after, or Jill Kowalczyk at cantalk.ca, and then I can put you in touch with our partners globally, if that works.
Thank you.
So Scott, Lee, and Nick, thank you very much for taking the time to connect with us today. We always enjoy our conversations and look forward to continuing our collaboration over the coming year. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you all. Thank you, Jill. Thank your international colleagues who, I don't know if they're still there. Some of them, oh, there, I see you there now. So we actually have, some of the sessions have already started. As many of you, if you've attended the panels, know that the panels are kind of overlapping the second session. You're welcome to step into those other sessions if you want, either through Zoom or through the online app and Zoom, or step into the room. But if you're going to go into a room, just obviously be conscious of not interrupting too much. But please do. That's the point of the conference, is to enjoy the content. Or take an extra long break, because we are moving into break and our next sessions actually start at 4 o'clock. So enjoy.
Well done. Well done. Yes, sir. I can help. That sounds
So
good.
Steve is my,
Yourself.
For John,
Oh, did you? How was that?
that's pretty good. It's very similar to what we saw.
Yes. Yeah.
Only first time I see the variation of that one.
Is it a little different each time?
Little,
Yeah.
but I think there's a lot of information, so every time this sinks in a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
more
more times you hear
details.
it.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's not a bad thing.
so when she retired, I said, we've got a separate.
Too much flair, Sandy. Just down a little bit. Just you can go crazy later.
Oh, right, at the bar.
Yes, at the bar. Yes.
End of day, we're trying to keep it lively, right?
That's right. Well, Ron's not here, Sandeep, so I'm here to heckle.
Oh, right, Ron's not here. I'm glad.
Yes.
Troublemaker.
Yeah, I've got a few of those.
Come on, you missed it.
I'm sure you'll fill the gap really well.
One of them for designers has already told me, and it's got probably 3 years left. There's
4 minutes.
there's open door. I've got a good
You're retired in years of life savings, that's.
I had 2 lines, but I'll just follow whatever you.
I will intro you.
Oh, you're introducing us?
No, I'll intro you and then you can intro.
Okay, Oh, perfect. yeah. No, you make it comfortable. That's
Speakers up there.
They can all, everyone hears. Yeah, that's the speaker. Just the, you wanna use that.
Tomorrow we are.
All right, in the interest of
I have it.
being very good today, I've only let one session go 2 minutes over. The rest of them I've started on time and finished on time, so Sandy, be prepared.
Do you know that?
Whoa, whoa,
You know her so well.
I will, the hook comes out.
Do you not have a reputation?
Yeah, the hook comes out at 5 o'clock, just so you know. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lori McMullen. I'm the Executive Director of Cuccio, helping to moderate, host, and arrange, and do whatever else needs to be done. to pull off this little event that we call Canheit 2022. And I hope you've been enjoying the sessions today. I hope it's been everything you hoped for in terms of getting back together with friends and colleagues and reconnecting, but more, just as importantly, I hope you're getting some good content, lessons learned, sharing experiences with your colleagues, and advancing that peer network that we all hold so dear and treasure so much. Without further ado, I should say welcome to our virtual audience as well, same as the other sessions. All of the other sessions, we have virtual attendees joining us from across the country through Zoom. So they are hooked in and listening, and they're able to interact by asking questions through chat. So I will be monitoring the chat for you. You don't have to worry about that. So for our virtual audience, if you do have questions through the presentation or at the end, please just pop them into chat to the moderator, and I will make sure your voice is heard. That's not usually a problem for me. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Sandeep Sidhu, who is the CIO at Emily Carr, and she will introduce her colleague and take you on a journey around equilibrium, a reality or a myth.
Thank you, Lori. We definitely don't want to be between you and the bar, so we will be finishing on time. That's our target. Suzanne Brackover is our university librarian. I'm going to let her introduce herself, and we've posed a question, but I don't know if we've found an answer. So we are hoping folks in this group can ask us some questions and help solve this puzzle, if there is one equilibrium somewhere out there. So I'll hand it over to you, Suzanne. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So as Sandeep said, I'm the university librarian at Emily Carr, University of Art and Design. So a bit of an interloper here, I suppose, probably one of the few non-IT folks in the room. And I've been at Emily Carr for about 6 years now. Sandeep, you've been there for about 1.5 years, I think. And pretty much right away, she identified some things that we could work on. So I'll just go through a quick agenda for today. So who we are, we've said that already. I'll give you the Emily Carr University context. Who we are as an institution, why we're thinking about this prioritization model, which will be the bulk of the presentation. I'll dive a little bit into the need for this prioritization model, and Sandeep will also discuss that as well. Sandeep will go through our 5-step process, talk about some outcomes, and then at the end, we'll have hopefully some time for some questions, feedback, talking about the future, etc. So, definitely in the spirit of like interactivity and collaboration, as this session is labeled a collaboration sessions, we have questions for you at the end, and we hope you can give us some answers so we can further refine this. So as you can see, Emily Carr was founded in 1925 and is the world leader in art, media, and design. It's one of British Columbia's oldest universities or institutions. We've only been a university for about 14 years now. And we're unique in the post-secondary sector in BC with our focus on art, design, media, education exclusively. We merge research, critical theory, and studio practice within an inclusive teaching and learning space. And much like everyone else in 2020-21, despite the ongoing global pandemic, we really were able to shift to remote and hybrid learning. Obviously, this was really reliant on our IT department being able to shift our systems. Emily Carr had some online teaching practices in place, but thinking about creative practice in the hybrid environment when students were really used to a practice-based education was incredibly challenging, and the IT department were aces. I don't know else how to say it. Sandeep came right in the middle of it, really trying to make things work for us. So you know, Emily Carr is the top art and design university in Canada and ranked 24th in world rankings. So we're fairly prominent across the globe. We have about 1,800 students enrolled in graduate and undergraduate program, plus extensive continuing studies. Let's see, am I on the right slide? So what you see here, please, it's our initials, ignore the, on the slides at the top there, is a kind of light version of our administrative committees. So these aren't our board committees, these aren't our Senate committees. These are really committees that are dedicated to administrative work at the institution. So why am I, as the university librarian, here at this IT conference? Much like many of your institutions, Emily Carr is a lean institution. Our human and financial resources need to stretch far to provide high-quality curriculum, services, resources to everybody. And because of that, I participate on a number of these committees. I'm on the Academic Affairs Committee, reporting directly to the provost, but I also chair the University Capital Budget Advisory Committee and sit on the Space Committee in my role as chair of Capital Budget Advisory Committee. So a bit unusual, perhaps, for the university librarian, but ultimately, because I'm part of this academic team, they really wanted an academic voice on the Capital Budget Advisory Committee, which is mostly made up of non-academic administration, CIO, Executive Director of Financial Services, other members of the IT team, our facilities director, et cetera. So I'm one of the academic voices in that space. So through our work on these committees, Sandeep also sits on the President's Executive Committee, the Capital Committee, the Space Committee, and of course our Digital Transformation Committee, which we'll be talking about later. Through this work on these committees, Sandeep and I both recognize that the creation and implementation of a project prioritization model would be critical to help Emily Carr maintain high-quality curriculum and best use our resources. We're really a kind of tech-forward institution. We want to have tech-forward education and curriculum, and this is critical because that's what the ministry is mandating here in BC. Our students should be graduating with jobs prospects in the tech industries, and so we're facing that pressure as well at Emily Carr to think about tech-forward and thinking about space, capital, digital transformation, all of those link into tech-forward curriculum. So being on these committees and thinking about how to prioritize strategically, best using and trying to get ministry resources, Sandeep approached me to collaborate with her on this prioritization model because currently, in my role as the Capital Budget Advisory Chair, we've really struggled with how to prioritize our requests. So a lot of folks at large institutions think of capital as buildings. You go to the ministry, whichever province you're in, and you ask them for $100 million for a building. Well, at Emily Carr, we basically get a laundry list of computers, tablets, printers, who knows what else, like every kind of equipment, ceramics equipment, all those sorts of things that we need to fulfill for our community. So we're not looking at $100 million for a new building. We got that about 7 years ago. We're just looking to fulfill the day-to-day curriculum needs of our institution through capital. And so we would be getting $2 million worth of requests with only like a very small pot of money, and we really didn't have a good way to prioritize that decision-making within capital. And it's sort of the same thing within IT. They had a list of 200 plus projects and no real way to prioritize that. Space Committee, a similar problem. We're getting requests to do renovations, again, hundreds of thousands of dollars, no way to weigh one against the other in a really thoughtful way, in an equitable way. So that's why Sandeep came to me, because I was having this problem, she was having this problem, and we were trying to look for a solution. So again, what does it have to do with IT? All my discussion of capital, again, it's about these projects. So the why. Transparency, why do we want to prioritize? Why is this necessary? Obviously, the big thing is, of course, using resources well, right? Making sure you have enough resources or allocating the very little resources you have to the most critical needs. But for us, we had these 5 principles. Rather, they were Sandeep's. She came up with these. So transparency for the community. Emily Carr community is vocal, they are critical, and they want to know what's going on. In a presentation earlier that I was in, the presenter was talking about how people didn't care about why they were using this money for this reason. Emily Carr, people care about why you're using money for any reason. So we really needed to be transparent with our students, with our faculty, with our staff, and with administrators. Again, prioritization, capacity building, really making sure folks understand what it means to prioritize, right? How to develop projects, how to execute projects, how we allocate resources, right? And so thinking about capacity building is creating that understanding around prioritization. Understanding dependencies between projects, I think that's fairly obvious. But again, thinking about, from my perspective, space and capital, the dependency is, it's one pot of money. So if I need to renovate a room, or if I need to buy new computers, not me personally, but of course the university, it's the same pot of money. That's a big dependency. Financial accountability, we all have that thing, right? Whether it's our board, whether it's the government, whether it's to our donors, stakeholders, anybody at the institution. And then reduce organizational change fatigue. We moved into a new campus about 5 years ago, and that nearly broke us. And I think that we've been in a long recovery period of 5 years of trying to think about organizational change, how to do it better, right? How to not freak people out. We're moving to Office 365, super exciting. I can't wait for Outlook. But other folks are like, what do you mean you're taking away my Apple Mail? So that's a big thing. I'm sure you all experience it. But yeah, so that's definitely the why principles. So really, as a test of these principles, Sandeep founded the Digital Transformation Council. Again, this is a committee really dedicated to thinking about IT projects. So not thinking about capital, not thinking about space, although those are always in the background when we're talking about large dependencies, large project-based committees at the institution, plus the number of people that sit on all those committees. I also sit on the DTC. So again, like, how do we best use people's times most efficiently? Sandeep's great at that, I'll be honest. Her meetings are really snappy. And again, this is the foundation, the guiding principles of the DTC. And we're happy to share these slides, I think, if anyone, I see lots of photo taking, but certainly we're happy to share the slides afterwards. So again, proposing projects, really establishing simple, flexible, and principle-based processes to prioritize. Again, that's like the big work that Sandeep and I have started before even the founding of the committee, I say, or the committee was sort of the jumpstart for it, but at the same time this work was happening sort of in the background simultaneously. Reviewing documents, project portfolios, actively provide input in the governance of information technology. That was really big for Sandeep. We wanted input from across the community. Endorsing policy, approve and sponsor and socialize key digital transformation. So it's more an approval for the president's executive committee, right? So we are making recommendations, we've reviewed all the documentation, and then the president's executive committee can just be like, yep, we feel like this has had enough oversight, going through the various stages of starting in the IT department with project sponsors and up to DTC, and to be moved on to. We wanted to be rubber stamped at the president's executive committee level. Again, we haven't done much of this, but establishing steering committees, et cetera, it's still in progress, right? And then, yeah, determining evaluation criteria for new projects and initiatives. That's the big piece here, I think, for us. And then, this is the DTC membership. It's pretty administratively heavy, but we have student representative, we have staff representatives, and we have faculty representatives. And the idea of having them on here, of course, is to meet the 5 principles, right? The why. But also the hope is to really arm everyone on this committee to be that outreach, right? To really go out into the spaces, socialize these new initiatives, these new IT projects, large and small. And so that's where we're at. So I'll pass it on to Sandeep, who's really going to talk about the prioritization model, which is what everyone's excited about, I'm sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So Suzanne and I were trying to figure out by this time your coffee would have worn out. I have a taser in my bag, so if I see any eyes closed, and I'm gonna walk around a little bit, just that's what helps me feel a little confident. When I arrived at the university, and I think even when Suzanne started her role, this is how we had the project list, Post-its. I've got a list. You got a list? Do we have one list? No, we have many lists. And they were just not talking to each other. People were talking to each other, the lists were not. And some of these were task lists, not even projects. Some were just ideas. So how do we go from here? What is important for us, and how do we start building on those 5 principles and deliver a clear picture for our organization was a goal that we both set out to do. And I came from SFU prior to this, and we've used an infotech model over there for project prioritization. I see Ben somewhere here. So Ben helped us look at what resources were available through infotech, and this was our foundation. We had a need. We need to look at a framework that understands the reality of higher ed, was flexible, and it was based on sort of 3 key areas. First, defining an intake process. In your intake process, you want to understand and define parameters of your information collection. Even simple ideas of giving every project a unique ID was a concept. So we started with understanding those stakeholder needs. We took what we already have and then went around, talked to different departments. The next one to understand, when we talk about project approval, what are we going to base our criteria on? So looking at our strategic objectives, coming up with a scorecard, and there's a template available in this tool that helps you build one. It comes with some really good ideas to get you started, but then you want to have a conversation internally, and that's why Suzanne and I went to different committees, talked about our own goals as a university, and mapped that out. And then ultimately, you want to put that against your resource capacity. How many of us today can say, I have 50 staff, but my actual project capacity is this percent? We didn't have that number. Now we do. 33%, 32, 33, we kind of roll depending on semester. And that was part of this process as well. So we took that template, we built a 5-step process more internally, how we go about it. The process starts with that intake. We identify every time there is a project on our list, we're going to assign a project owner. And that generally came from my leadership team. One of my 4 managers will be voluntold or volunteer, depending on the day. They will pick that project up. They will go and talk to our sponsors, key stakeholders, get all the information. That will go into our, that intake will go into a process where DTC chairs, which is myself and our provost. So our provost academic, Trish Kelly and I, Dr. Trish Kelly and I chair that committee, and we score that against the evaluation criteria we've built. Then we take it to a few advisory committees. One of them, a very important one, is our Learning Technology Advisory Group. That's where lots of conversations around our curriculum that Suzanne talked about happen. We take their feedback, we go back, change some scores if we've got additional information that we missed. And it sort of goes in loops, and feedback is really, really important. Having an iterative process, I'm using agile principles here. It goes to the DTC members, which is the committee that Suzanne and I are part of. They look at our recommendations, how we've scored it. They have the chance to challenge it or provide more information. We've had 2 rounds where we've taken that information to our committee. They've asked some really good questions, provide input, and we've then realigned. And finally, it goes to our President's Executive council. So Tricia and I take that as a recommendation. That's where approval happens. We do this every semester. So we build a pipeline. We go, what are we going to work on next semester? It's a lot of work, but it's incredibly powerful is what we felt. We're a little behind a month. We kind of do it in the beginning of the next semester, so we're shifting our timeline. But just building the first year has been pretty interesting. So this is what did the balancing act look like? For this semester, in our intake, we identified 87 projects. So over 200 lists. Spring, it came down to, I think, 63 or something. For summer, 87. Intake included some of the projects we didn't complete in the previous term. Remember, the key here is not to complete those projects in that term, but is to actively work on those projects. We separated that. We also realized we need to have a cutoff. There's some operational projects that DTC is not interested. Those were not included. So on top of 87, I think we identified another 10 or 20 that were operational managed by my managers. We also identified that there is a gap, that there's some projects that were happening in different departments. We were not aware of them. It's getting better as we are having conversations. So our supply was only 44 staff. And out of 44, how many would work on, what percentage are they working on operations versus projects? This is very different from role to role. You look at your service task team versus your application development team, capacity is different. And skills are different. We also realized that capacity outside ITS is also needed. Suzanne talked about our Microsoft 365 change. There is a capacity need outside ITS, absolutely, for every implementation, every rollout we do. So that's something we are working towards, but we recognize at this point, but we don't account for it. Alignment, we wanted a framework that was consultative. It had semesterly planning, as I talked about it, and it was adaptive based on feedback. So those are some of the things that came out. So what does the intake look like? This is just a snapshot of what that, it's a spreadsheet. Very good automated spreadsheet. You can do so much with these. This was easily shareable across the organization as well. I'm not going to go over different columns. The base model that came out of Infotech had recommendations on certain areas. We added and removed a few in here. So we made it our own. We're running out of columns now. So we have to stop somewhere. It's finding that balance. So intake, and then this is the resource planning piece. There's even more information in here. Basically what we did, we didn't include our resources by person, but we did it by unit. It was a good, easy start. We said we have 5 help desk people, we have 2 project managers. We looked at their capacity, and that tool actually allows you to get down to this. So now we can actually say for this term it's actually 41%. What can we do with 41%? Is going to be the next step. And this is very customizable as well. We also were able to, something very interesting that I haven't brought to DTC yet, was in this tool, we could actually look at if we added another temporary BA or a PM, how would that shift our capacity? So that's been, the predictive modeling has been really interesting for us. This prioritization criteria took us a few months to build, and it is work in progress. What we identified were 3 key areas, and we broke each of those areas into 2, where we were defining a scoring level. How much money it would take, to what risk of doing or not doing it. And with strategic alignment, we looked at 2 key areas, our strategic plan, and EDI is a huge focus in our organization. We wanted to see if this project's going to help EDI action plan move forward or not. Yes or no? Or how many out of those initiatives? We try to keep it simple. If it checks all the 10 initiatives, it gets a score of 5. I can talk about this all day within the range of time, right, Laurie? Within the range of time, we're going to cut it short. But happy to chat if anyone wants, as Suzanne offered, a copy of what we've put together. And once you go through this process, magic happens. You get a list of 3 sections. And these three sections, green is clearly it's aligned with your priorities, do it. That's what the process tells you. Then the deliberation piece is, yes, it does, but you really don't have the capacity, so you got to prioritize here. And the third one is forget about it. When we do the scoring, this morning our keynote talked about bias. It comes in here. What I know, DTC chairs, what we know is we collect that information. Our intake process, we haven't started writing project briefs for every project, so very limited information. So we give ourselves, this becomes a conversation topic. We give ourselves a starting point. We implemented a similar model at SFU. I see Eric in the back. Go and talk to him as well. He's also a troublemaker. He uses a similar model in his team. And it was a conversation in the committee as well. People would score, we'll look at aggregate score, and that was really a starting point to determine priorities as well. I'm gonna keep moving along. It also gives you also to point out how many days it's been in the backlog. One of the things I keep hearing every meeting I go into, I've been looking at this project for 4 years. IT has not moved it. Like, is it documented? What's the name of the project? Who's gonna work on it? What are you trying to solve? Do we do requirements? None of that. No, I had an idea 4 years ago. So we needed to move away from that a little bit, and the backlog really helps. We've also added some imagery that's created by our students. So this is one of the art pieces. It was like, we know where we want to go. We see the moon over there, but the journey over there is quite a bit tricky. It's not as easy as, you know, you've got your process, you've got your framework, you're gonna put all the numbers in and it's gonna tell you what to do, not really. The deliberation piece comes with also looking at your projects on a matrix that helps you validate value versus execution, so you can have a conversation from that project perspective. We've started having conversations around this visual in the DTC, the Digital Transformation Council. And it's not about yes or no, is this the right thing to do given what we have? And what this tool also allows you to do is when you have that conversation, you realize, you know what, this project is dependent on another project. We didn't have a way to score it. So you can actually force include it or force exclude it. So it goes away from your green to your gray. So it goes on hold. If you don't want to work on it, you force exclude it. So it has its mechanisms to be flexible. And over time, our goal is, this is our almost entering second year of using this, is to make it more accurate so we do less of this. We don't want to be the loudest voice in the room to say, no, you got to bump it up just because my idea is the best idea. You've never heard of that before, haven't you? The other piece, we realized nobody actually knew how much value we were providing to each of the portfolios. How many projects were sponsored by different units? They're like, my project never gets done. Yet, oh yeah, sure, we've got 2 projects in your unit. I'm picking on communications and marketing. Robbie's a good friend, so I think I can do that. We move these projects along and have conversations in our relationship meetings to say, I think we have 10 on the list. Is there anything you want to take out? Not add in, we've already done that. Anything you want to take out? It's coming. Are you guys ready? We also talk about those pieces of change management. We also created a project dashboard. We talked about principle of transparency. Half the time we were working on things and people had no idea. They didn't know who the project manager was. Again, I can talk about this another time. Once we prioritize, the projects get approved, this dashboard gets updated, project managers pick up, and then it's their responsibility to update this every month. It gets communicated from president all the way to our faculties. We also just added this, and now this is the connection with capital. When we get these requests to put together a capital plan for the ministry, okay, what do we put together? Easiest answer is, what's on your portfolio? If you didn't have that, then we scramble. We're like, okay, I think that's a good idea, maybe not. So we've been now also adding some of our estimates in here from capital and operating perspective. So we build a capital plan, hopefully, from here. Starting point, not done yet. We're leveraging SharePoint to build a simple dashboard, and learning through metrics, looking back has been incredibly powerful. And this is a comparison between 2 semesters right now for you. In 2022, our intake was 61, it's gone up to 73. There's some numbers we have to update because we just finished the round for summer, so bear with me if I have different numbers from previous slides. I wanted to highlight one thing, which is our completion rate. So we approved in spring 32 projects, we only completed 14. So that's actually a true capacity to complete. There were a mix of small, medium, large. We never had that metric before. This semester, summer, we have so many vacations. We want people to live a normal life and go away, take a break. Our capacity has gone down, so we adjust that. We've looked at approving 21 projects only, this term focusing on getting ready for fall. And we don't know how many we're going to complete. I've put 16 over there. If we do 10, I think we'll be good. And that's the expectation when I meet with, I report directly to the president, and we have direct sponsorship and support from her. And the expectation I've set with her is we're going to try and aim get 10 done, and we're going to do a really good job with 10. And these are the 10 I'm focusing on. We do get pushback. That's part of the process. So we left this slide. If anyone's interested in a live demo, wants to talk to us, please let us know. We're happy to set it up through Zoom at another time, and I'm sure Ben would love to join that conversation and show you how to best utilize this. So I'm going to hand it over to my partner in crime, Suzanne. Got a few more slides.
Yeah. Thanks, Sandeep. So phase 1 was really to, establish the Digital Transformation Council and create this prioritization model, put it into action. Phase 2, which is what I'm selfishly waiting for, is how do we bring a prioritization model that works across these 3 kind of critical committees, right? How do we really think about this holistically? The pot of money is the same ultimately, so how do we make sure we're thinking about our priorities really well? A couple of timeline slides that Sandeep had put together. I think our times were slightly shifted to this due to pandemic priorities. So this was, I guess, the last year and a half, pandemic basically. And then a roadmap to the future, which is things that we hope to accomplish. Certainly in the realm of the DTC. I think we're all partners in there, trying to make that work. And so I'll just say the questions this morning that Katie Ingram was asking toward the end, thinking about, as Sandeep already mentioned, like, have we tested this model for bias? What trade-offs did we make? Have our design choices upheld ethical principles? What are the impacts of funding and power dynamics? Have we fully considered the needs of our diverse university community? Those are all Katie's questions, right? Exactly. And I read those and I was like, oh gosh, yeah, this absolutely applies to this work, right? We need to bring these values and ideas into the work we're doing, whether it be IT, whether it be capital projects, whether it be space projects. So really resonated with me. I don't have the answers right now. I would say, Katie recommends that we do an assessment, right? And I think that Sandeep would agree at this point in time, it's worth doing. We're a year into this. Let's assess the model. Is it giving the results that we need? Is it transferable to other committees, other work? So questions for all of you. We have 10 minutes and people have questions for us. Okay. That's fine. So those are questions for you, but feel free to ask us questions as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah.
Questions there's nothing online right this instant, so is there any questions from anyone in the room? I see, oh, there you go, Michael Burr, speak up so our.
Yes, I'll speak really loudly. So I guess just kind of at a high level, I'm curious if there's unanimous buy-in to your approach from your senior leadership, or do they have their own prioritization and project management progress or process or framework or portfolio?
I mean, I have a perspective. Sandeep is more senior leadership than I am. I report to the provost and she reports to the president, but my sense is no. I think my sense is that they are really taking recommendations from these committees, whether it be capital, whether it be space, whether it be academic affairs. And depending on which committee, there are senior leadership members, or the president isn't on any of these, but in some cases we have VPs on these committees and in other cases we don't, right? And so they are really relying on the work of these committees to do all the work and make the recommendations. So there can be ultimately a kind of rubber stamping, but not exactly. Would you concur?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
When there's no project management office, Michael.
No.
There's no framework that existed prior to this. And what was happening was anyone who was more organized and had thought it through, had a plan, took it to PEC, got it approved. So we broke that model of let's open this process out, and it's not for President's Executive Committee to spend so much time reviewing these. We need a stakeholder group, and that's where DTC brand new group came about. There was no IT governance committee. So we actually took away work from them, made recommendations rather than get them to decide it. And we've received nothing but support to a point. We are starting a new strategic planning process, and they are looking to leverage this model as well. It will change, absolutely, because this was purely to serve one need. But yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
I do have one from virtual, and then I'll come to you. From Brigitte, you mentioned looking at capacity, but at which step do you evaluate the efforts and costs of the initiatives?
Intake. So what we did was part of our intake process, some proposals came to us. Again, we only had one project manager position vacant. So there was no project manager position. Proposals were coming in by emails and just requests, and very immature. What we started doing is we have a project brief. So once a proposal is written, it starts with estimate, then it's given to a BA to do analysis, and then they put sort of a little bit more accurate estimation in a project brief. So it happens before scoring and then actual validation after scoring. So I hope I answered that. Does that sound right? Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Over here?
Yeah, that was part of, I had kind of a two-parter, and that was the second part. So thank you for that. It's already been answered.
Maybe project it.
Yeah, the first part was, is the process the same regardless of the scale or the budget attached to the project?
Correct, yeah. It's all projects. We have 4 levels or types of projects, small, medium, large to extra large, and they all get evaluated. In our scoring model, you'll see the larger the project, the more money, it gets scored less because it's more complex and requires more engagement. So that's part of our process. They all go into the same funnel and you actually have the ability in the tool to adjust that. What is your t-shirt size for the project as well, which we found, we're still, I think, figuring it out ourselves. But yeah, great question.
The gentleman in red and then in black.
I'm curious, you mentioned about change fatigue. How does that work into your prioritization?
We actually, great question. Another one we added in there was change readiness. So we evaluate the change readiness of an organization or the stakeholders that it will impact, and the more complex and requires more change will get lower score because now it requires more resources. So we looked at those 3 criteria and 6 scoring levels one question is around change readiness. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just in that change management session from Guelph. I believe you were right there. And, you know, asking where our organization is at in terms of like change readiness. We were at the level 2. I think that's something that we still struggle with, right? And that we're still trying to establish a process to roll out change in a really effective way. I think as I mentioned at the top, we're super lean, right? Other folks might think we're administratively heavy, but we know that as administrators and as individual departments, we're super lean. So rolling out communication plans, you know, being able to implement these projects, it's super tough for us. And so all of that, of course, no project management office, things like that, that really impacts the organization's change readiness, right? Because they're just not even used to having a good change, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Sandeep has been incredible with her project management knowledge, but that's pretty new to Emily Carr. You know, it's a new thought at Emily Carr for sure. Yeah.
Who's allowed to submit these project proposal or project?
Anybody.
Students?
Anybody.
Anybody.
Anybody and everybody.
And they will all be considered the exact same way. They don't have.
Absolutely. We will go back to them and ask questions and suggestions. We haven't heard anything from students yet, but we are actually about to open up an intake online form, so we may hear something. I'm expecting.
I think you may have just answered my question, but how did you communicate this process? Even presenting the idea, right? Because it's if you're saying that everyone and anyone submits the projects and proposals, how has this been communicated?
We're still working on it. We're not there yet. I think we need to do more with communication. Suzanne showed a slide around committees. I inserted myself in every committee. That was a start. Love meetings. I love committees because that's where decisions are made. Suzanne and I became the spokespeople, went around, talked to faculties, went into these committees that some we were chairing, some were part of. So our conversation started there. And you just have to keep reiterating the message. I attend faculty meetings every second month. And the entire faculty, we're small universities, and entire faculty meeting is there. So much more accessible. Yeah, I think that's been our approach. And
yeah, and we're embarking as an institution on a like town hall process for various things. So Finance 101, I hope to do Capital 101 to really make sure that the institution and our stakeholders understand the work that we're doing. So I think, you know, thinking about, you know, IT projects 101 and having folks understand that as well is probably a good way forward. But again, it's like a pilot year for this, right? So we're I think we're too soon to communicate.
we're in
almost.
a honeymoon
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
Loving it.
Yeah.
I think
One.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
See what CIOs can
Exactly.
do.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we have got 2 minutes, and I do have an online question, and I think there's one here, and did you say there's another?
Yeah. From the beginning.
Okay, we're gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna give the online first. Trevor, Puffin, no, forget it, Trevor, sorry. Did I hear you correctly that you pulled the operational projects out of the mix? And if that's correct, why, and how do you prioritize that work against the rest of the projects?
Great question. In this intake, we actually, again, use a classification way. We felt we needed to start somewhere, so we drew the line. Anything that did not make the non-operational cut was up to the manager to make a decision. They could take portion of their capacity and assign it to operational projects. We did take them out. Our goal is to add it in at a later stage as we mature.
What is a typical turnaround time from the moment someone submitted a project proposal to the time the decision is made about the project, whether it goes ahead, goes on hold, et cetera, et cetera?
Great question. As I said, we're still sort of a month behind. I would say about 2.5 months. That's what I'm just saying.
Maybe.
Yeah, we'll work with 2.5 months, but I can confirm.
Okay, thank you.
We've only done 2 rounds of this, but great question. Yeah, another metric that we could capture.
Yep.
Yeah.
I suspect it would have, the project itself would dictate a little bit of that, depending on how much
Absolutely.
research you have to do.
Sometimes we don't know at all. I want this.
Yeah, that's a little bit different.
Yes.
And I'm, so I'm gonna give
87
you the last
projects.
word.
87 projects is a lot. So do you do a full estimate on all those 87 projects or full project charter on those before approval?
We don't have any project proposals yet for all of them, only very few. And that's part of our project management office that we're establishing. And we're actually building a project management office not for IT. We're building it for the university. We're building an enterprise project management office that will be accountable to the president and will look after all projects across the university.
So it's safe to say you have 87 identified opportunities.
Correct.
That may or may not result in projects, which may or may not result in actual
Absolutely.
delivery.
And we sometimes see some duplication as well. We're doing another project,
Right.
comes along, and go, oh, we can solve this problem here, boom, let's get it done. But certainly, I can see the more we talk about this, the demand is actually increasing. Now everyone thinks that we can do all projects, and it's coming our way, so.
The point of this is to quell that.
Yes.
Explain why.
To manage it, yes, thank you.
Right, so we are at time, and with that, I'd like to join me in thanking Sandeep. For those of you looking for shuttles, I hope you can look at the transportation schedule. I won't try to say what it is because I haven't looked for something. So shuttles back to the hotel, and then I do know the shuttles will be picking up you from the hotels, if you're at the hotels or residence, 6:15 to go to the Clarion for a celebration evening. I hope you'll all be able to join us. And have a good night.
Thank you, Lori.
It's 45 minutes walk. Yeah.
Yeah, we can go around.
Thank you.